All right, today we are diving headfirst into the facts, the evidence, and the absolute enduring enigma of one of the most famous unsolved serial killer cases in American history. In this explainer, we're tracking a phantom, a killer who completely terrorized the San Francisco Bay Area, essentially hijacked the media, and left behind this bizarre trail of blood and cryptograms that people are literally still debating decades later. We are, of course, talking about the Zodiac mystery.
Okay, let's dive into this. We have to start with this terrifying numbers game, because there is a stark, horrific discrepancy right at the heart of this case. Over the course of his correspondence with the press, the killer explicitly claimed to have murdered 37 people. 37. Yet, despite years of exhaustive investigations, law enforcement can only officially confirm 5 deaths and 2 surviving victims. It forces us to ask a deeply unsettling question, right? Was this guy just a pathological exaggerator desperate to claim a higher body count? Or is there a vast, hidden graveyard of victims out there that we simply know nothing about?
And whenever he wanted to remind the public he was out there watching, he opened his letters with this exact, chilling introduction. "This is the Zodiac speaking." It wasn't just a greeting. Actually, scratch that, it was more like a brand, a trademark of terror. He didn't want to be some anonymous criminal in the background. He wanted a spotlight, and he knew exactly how to command it.
A California reign of terror?
So walking through the timeline of his confirmed strikes, it all begins in December 1968 on a really dark, remote stretch of Lake Herman Road in Berryessa, where teenagers David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were tragically shot. Then you can see the tension start to escalate. We move to July 1969 at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, then September 1969 at Lake Berryessa, and finally October 1969 right in the city of San Francisco. Notice the compression here. 4 confirmed, absolutely brutal strikes over just 10 months. The pacing alone spread like wildfire and left law enforcement completely scrambling.
The Lake Berryessa attack.
To really understand just how erratic and honestly theatrical this killer was, we have to look closely at a specific crime scene that completely breaks the mold of his earlier shootings. On the afternoon of September 27, 1969, Lake Berryessa, which is this beautiful man-made lake up north of Napa, was drawing lots of visitors for boating and picnicking. College students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard were just relaxing along the shoreline. It's an idyllic daytime setting, you know? But suddenly, a man stepped out from the shade of the trees. And he wasn't just a man with a weapon. He was wearing this bizarre, black hooded costume with a white, crossed circle symbol stitched directly onto the front. He forced them at gunpoint to be tied up with clothesline, and then, completely unprovoked, attacked them with a foot-long knife. Tragically, Cecilia died from her injuries a few days later, but Brian miraculously survived to tell this harrowing tale.
But what's truly chilling here is the sheer audacity of what the killer did next. He didn't just flee the scene in a panic like you might expect. He left physical evidence behind, sure, boot prints in the dirt, the clothesline used on the victims, but the most shocking piece of evidence? He walked right up to Brian's car, took out a black marker, drew that crossed circle symbol on the door, and literally wrote out a personalized receipt of his crime. He listed the dates of his previous shootings and added September 27, 69, 6:30 by knife. He was curating his own crime scene.
But writing on the car? That apparently wasn't enough. At 7:40 p.m., a phone rang at the Napa County Police Department. Officer David Slant answered. From a public payphone just a few blocks away, the killer spoke in this low, monotone voice. He gave the police directions to the victims and then chillingly added, "I'm the one who did it." His desperate need for credit was absolute. He couldn't stand the idea of anyone else taking the blame or the glory for his horrific acts.
Murder in Presidio Heights. Now, just when authorities thought they had a solid psychological profile of a killer who attacks couples in remote, rural areas, everything changed. Notice the stark difference in his methodology here. You've got Berryessa, daytime, remote shoreline, an elaborate hooded costume, and a knife. But then you look at San Francisco, nighttime, the wealthy urban neighborhood of Presidio Heights, regular street clothes, and a 9mm pistol. The Zodiac's completely unpredictable shifting of methods, locations, and weapons made him virtually impossible to profile. It's like a giant puzzle where the pieces keep changing shape. Just as police set a trap for one type of killer, he morphed into another.
So on October 11, 1969, 29-year-old cab driver Paul Stein picked up a passenger and drove him to Presidio Heights. Tragically, for his trouble, Stein was fatally shot in the head. 3 young witnesses actually watched this happen from across the street and immediately called the police. But here is the massive procedural error that haunts this case to this day. Due to some confusion during the dispatch call, responding units were mistakenly told to look for a black male suspect. Because of this mix-up, a patrol car reportedly passed right by a white male walking away from the scene who perfectly matched the actual description of the killer. He just slipped right through their fingers.
Ciphers, letters, and threats.
The murder of Paul Steen actually marked the end of the confirmed physical attacks, but it launched an entirely new phase of his reign, an unprecedented campaign of psychological warfare waged directly through the printing presses of the Bay Area. Now, you might be wondering, why did he write to the newspapers? I want you to really ponder his underlying motives here. He demanded that his letters be published on the front pages, or else he threatened to kill again. So what does this all mean? Was it simply a narcissistic desire to take credit? Or was it a twisted, elaborate game of control, manipulating the police, the media, and the public like pieces on a chessboard?
To make absolutely sure the newspapers complied with his demands, he escalated his threats. Take a second to let this horrific quote sink in. Following the Presidio Heights murder, he mailed a letter threatening to shoot out the tires of a school bus and attack children. The impact of this single sentence was staggering. It completely panicked the entire Bay Area. We're talking patrol cars and aircraft being forced to shadow school buses and armed officers literally riding on board with the kids just to provide protection. He was holding an entire region hostage with nothing more than a pen and a piece of paper.
And this whole campaign just brilliantly illustrates his absolute mastery of media dominance and psychological manipulation. When police doubted he was the real killer, he mailed a blood-stained piece of Paul Stine's shirt to the San Francisco Chronicle to prove it. No way to deny that, right? He sent detailed diagrams of a bomb he called the Death Machine. When police announced they found bloody fingerprints, he wrote back mocking them, claiming he coated his fingertips in airplane glue to avoid leaving prints. And, of course, the cryptograms. One of them, the infamous 340 cipher, was so complex, it took a team of international codebreakers 51 years to finally crack it in 2020.
The modern DNA hunt.
So, as the letters eventually stopped around 1974, the case went cold. But the science of criminal investigation certainly didn't stand still, which brings us from the historical terror of 1969 right into the cutting-edge forensic laboratories of the present day. Now, for decades, one name loomed larger than any other in this investigation: Arthur Leigh Allen. He was a former elementary school teacher and a convicted sex offender, a horrific background that really only cemented the suspicion against him. Over the years, circumstantial evidence continually pointed in his direction, to the point where he became the only suspect officially named by law enforcement. Even though Allen died in 1992, he remained the prime suspect for investigators. They just needed the hard science to finally prove it.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because the stakes for modern science here could not be higher. In May 2018, the Vallejo Police Department made global headlines when they announced plans to use modern genetic testing on the old Zodiac evidence. Then, in March 2019, incredible news broke. A DNA profile was successfully obtained, so the agonizing wait began. For over 6 years, the lab work continued, cross-referencing and building the data. Finally, in September 2025, the results were finalized. The definitive answer was here.
And the answer was a massive twist. According to the Vallejo Police Department, the genetic profile obtained from the evidence absolutely did not match the suspected Zodiac Killer. It wasn't Arthur Leigh Allen. For privacy reasons, no other information was disclosed. But you can imagine the incredible frustration of this recent dead end. Nearly 6 decades of suspicion, a massive modern scientific effort, and the result didn't close the book. It only ripped out the final chapter and deepened the mystery all over again.
Which kind of leaves us right back where we started, looking at an active, open case that stubbornly refuses to be closed. We have his horrifying words, we have his symbol, and now investigators have a genetic profile that belongs to someone, but we still don't know who. So will the Zodiac's DNA ever reveal his true identity, or will the phantom who terrorized California forever remain just a shadow? Thank you for walking through this explainer with us today. Keep asking questions, keep looking at the facts, and never stop trying to understand the world around you.